You are soaking wet, somewhere between Norway and the edge of the known world, and you cannot feel your hands. The wind is coming from the north at speeds that would make modern sailors radio for help. The spray has been hitting your face for 6 days. The temperature of the water around you is 3 degrees Celsius, cold enough to stop a human heart within minutes of full immersion. Your wool tunic is drenched. The planks beneath your feet are slick with ice. There is no cabin. There is no heater. There is no fire. Not on an open wooden ship crossing open ocean, not unless you wanted to solve the cold problem by creating a worse one. And you are not suffering. You are working 6 days out, maybe 12 more to go. You have crossed this water before. Your father crossed it before you, his father before him. Every one of those ancestors solved this exact problem in this exact cold, without a single piece of technology that you would recognize as survival gear. If even one of them had failed, just once, on just one crossing, you would not exist to wonder how they did it. The real answer is not what you think. It is not about toughness. It is not about being built differently. And the specific detail that explains how human tissue can survive North Atlantic exposure for weeks without fire, we will get to that. It is stranger than the cold itself. Here is why this question is not trivia. Hypothermia kills a healthy adult in water at 3 degrees Celsius within roughly 30 minutes. The North Atlantic, between Norway and Iceland, sits at those temperatures for most of the year. Viking crossings from Norway to Greenland averaged around 4 weeks at sea. That is not a rounding error. That is not a short hop where you grit your teeth and push through. 28 days of sustained cold exposure, on an open deck, with waves breaking over the hull regularly, is a physiological problem that modern survival science cannot fully explain away with willpower. Something else was happening. Something structural. And understanding it changes how you think about your own body and what it was built to endure. Let us start with the myth we need to demolish first. The myth is that Vikings were simply tougher than us. Genetically hardened, biologically superior, adapted into something post-human by centuries of cold. It is a flattering story, and it is almost entirely wrong. Forensic analysis of Viking-era skeletal remains shows the same bone density, the same joint degeneration, the same cold-related tissue damage that you would expect in any human population. They were not superhumans. Researchers studying modern Norwegian cold-water fishermen, populations with unbroken lineage from the Norse seafaring tradition, have confirmed through controlled physiological studies that baseline cold tolerance in these groups is not statistically different from other Northern European populations. The body did not change. What changed was the system built around the body. The Vikings did not evolve past the cold. They engineered around it. That distinction matters more than almost anything else in this story. Now, the core mechanism. The word is thermoregulation. Your body's continuous involuntary war to keep your core temperature at 37 degrees Celsius, regardless of what the environment is doing. Your skin vessels constrict, shunting blood toward your organs. Your muscles begin to shiver, generating heat through movement. Your metabolic rate climbs. This system works for a while. But it has a hard limit: caloric fuel. Thermoregulation is extraordinarily expensive. In sustained cold, your body can burn through energy reserves at 2 to 3 times its normal resting rate. Run out of fuel, and the system collapses. This is what actually kills people in cold environments. Not the cold directly. The cold wins when it drains your body's reserves faster than you can replace them. The Vikings understood this, not in those terms, not with that vocabulary, but in practice, in calories, in what they packed and what they ate and when. There is a specific detail about what they were eating that rewrites everything you assumed about Viking sea rations. We will get there. It is the most counterintuitive part of this entire story. In 1991, a preserved Viking-era vessel found during excavations at Roskilde in Denmark. One of the Skuldelv ships contained residual organic material that researchers from the National Museum of Denmark were able to partially analyze. Separate analysis of Norse middens and settlement waste layers in Iceland and Greenland revealed that seafarers on long crossings were consuming extraordinary quantities of fat. Not lean protein, fat. Rendered blubber, dried fatty fish, aged butter, some of it fermented to the point that modern food safety standards would classify it as spoiled. One estimate based on caloric density calculations suggests a Norse sailor on a North Atlantic crossing may have been consuming upward of 5,000 to 6,000 calories per day, the majority from lipid sources. 5 to 6,000 calories. Sit with the scale of that. A modern endurance athlete in extreme conditions targets around 4,000. These were not accidental dietary choices. They were thermoregulatory fuel loads. Fat metabolizes into heat more efficiently than carbohydrate in sustained cold exposure. The Vikings were not eating like that despite the crossing. They were eating like that because of it. Here is the twist. The fermented, rancid-smelling, visually unpleasant fats that characterize preserved North Sea rations, the Hockerel-adjacent preserved products that modern visitors to Iceland find revolting. Those were the survival mechanism. Their smell was the sign of their function. Long-chain fatty acids in fermented animal products survive storage without refrigeration, remain calorie-dense under compression, and metabolize into sustained heat over hours rather than the sharp spike and crash of sugar-based fuels. What looked like desperation food was precision engineering. The disgust was the feature. The Vikings were not eating that because they had no better option. It was the better option. Now let us close the loop. The fatal weakness of thermoregulation under sustained cold is fuel depletion, but there is a second layer, and it is the one that required actual ingenuity: wind, specifically convective heat loss. Your body can generate heat, but if wind is stripping it away faster than it is produced, the system still collapses. The solution the Vikings developed was not insulation in the modern sense. It was a layering architecture. Archaeological textile evidence, particularly from the Greenland Norse settlements studied by researcher Els Ostergaard, reveals a precise structure: an innermost layer of woven wool worn directly against skin, a middle layer of denser woven wool, and an outer layer of vadmal, a heavily fulled, almost felted fabric that reduced wind penetration dramatically. Crucially, wool retains roughly 70% of its insulating capacity even when fully saturated. Waterlogged wool is still warm wool. Now, one more thread worth following. This clothing system required continuous maintenance at sea. Someone had to manage it. That organizational detail turns out to explain something surprising about who was actually on those ships. Cross-cultural studies of cold-adapted seafaring populations, from Norse to Inuit to the Ainu of northern Japan, show a consistent pattern that researchers now call cooperative thermoregulation. Not a metaphor, a documented behavior. People in sustained cold environments unconsciously synchronize rest cycles, share body heat through physical proximity during sleep periods, and distribute thermal labor, the work of staying warm, across the group rather than leaving it to individual bodies. On Viking longships, the sleeping arrangement was not random. Crew members slept in rotating clusters, positioned to share radiated body heat across a combined mass significantly larger than any individual could generate. The group itself became the heat source. This is still debated as to how consciously it was organized, but the behavioral evidence across cold climate cultures is consistent enough that researchers consider the pattern real. None of this is a moral failure of modern life. We did not make a mistake by building heated cabins on ships, but consider what was dismantled when we did: the cooperative architecture, the caloric discipline, the textile intelligence, the deep knowledge of exactly how much the body could endure and exactly what it needed to keep going. That knowledge was not written in books. It lived in practice, in habit, in the bodies of people who crossed the same water every generation and returned. When the need disappeared, the knowledge dissolved with it. Nobody sensible is arguing we should return to fermented blubber and open-deck ocean crossings. But something real was lost when survival stopped requiring that kind of collective precision. You are sitting in warmth that your ancestors could not imagine, reading about cold that you will never have to face. Your body is the same body that crossed that water, the same thermoregulation system, the same capacity for fat metabolism, the same instinct to press close to another warm body when the temperature drops. You did not become capable of surviving those crossings. You already were. The Vikings did not conquer the cold. They understood it, fueled against it, dressed against it, and held each other through it. They carried the answer not in their genes but in their systems, in their wool, in their rendered fat, in the way they slept. You inherited a body built by the people who got that right, every single time, for 1,000 years.